Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Welcome to Just About Managing podcast. I'm back. I thought we'd kick off with a little chat today around what we've been up to the last couple of weeks. And then we're going to swing into a little bit of conversation and reflection on Craig Preston, our guest from last week. I've listened to that twice now, and I've found the whole content amazing. He can talk really fast, so you have to listen to it twice to actually get everything in. So that was great. And then we are today. This is we've now completed our first 12 episodes of Just About Managing. So it's the first series in the bag. And we were going, the three of us are just going to have at the end just some reflections on what we've learnt going through the exercise of producing this podcast for you guys. And don't worry, it's not the end. We're then going to launch straight into series 2 with renewed vigour. So yes, but Chris, you've been obviously away. Enjoying yourself in was it sunnier climes in Germany, or was it just football and quality time?
John, right, so two things for me in the last couple of weeks. First thing was Germany, and then the second thing was Mallorca. All right, so the Mallorca bit was sunny, and the Germany bit, let's be frank, was not. However, it was epic. So a fantastic week with my dad. We went to see two of the England games in the Euros. So when we did the podcast, Lee and I with Craig, I was actually dialing in from National Forest, that's kind of like was near where England was staying. And two of those games, there were two that we won. So there was the Slovakia game where Bellingham did the overhead kick in the 95th minute, and we were down that end and went absolutely crazy. It was brilliant. And then the second game at the end of the second week was in Dusseldorf, and it was against Switzerland, and we won on penalties, and we were down the Swiss end. So we again went crazy until all the Swiss kind of like got a bit agitated. So then we just did it a bit more. So it was really good. It was like fantastic. It was great to spend that amount of time with my dad on his own. He's 80 this year.
Wow.
He's massively into football. So am I. We ate and drank loads of food, and it was really good. And then when I came back last week, the family and I went to Mallorca, and it was lovely. It was really beautiful. It was like 28 degrees. We're on the west side of the island, to anybody who knows Mallorca, which is far away from Magaluf and Palma Nova, and they were just like beautiful coves, really, really good. And not that you can tell, but I've got a little bit of colour, not much, still very shiny. But yeah, that's what I've been up to. But yeah, and then it came back, and it was like we had the summer right in the UK. We had 2 days worth of sun, and now it's gone away again. All right, but I've had a brilliant couple of weeks, guys. Been absolutely epic.
What was the atmosphere like in Germany,
on my shelf up here now. Oh, you can't really see him, like over next to that football picture there, just around the corner.
For those of you watching on video,
there's a Germany conch thing. Yeah, so really good.
What was the atmosphere like out there, Chris, amongst the other fans? Was it good?
It's amazing. Really, really friendly. It was all really good. Yeah, the Germans are just fantastic organisers.
Yeah.
So everything works. Just brilliant. And if anybody gets a chance to go and see any sport, particularly like football overseas, but you go and see it in Germany, it's just like so well done. Just brilliant. Fantastic.
Yeah. And you sound like you've come back with even more spring in your Tigger step than normal.
Well, I think what's interesting is to get some time away wherever you are, whether you're like in a full-time job or you're entrepreneurs like us or new ventures for you, John, that no doubt we'll hear about in a minute. It's always good to take time out to then recharge those batteries. And I do feel like completely refreshed. I mean, I was talking to Lee earlier and I was like, yeah, chatter, really up for it, and loads of energy. All right, so I'm back into London tomorrow. Started to go and see different organisations around Infinity and the network of like coaches that we're going to be bringing to the market. I've gone through all the trademark backwards and forths and trademark for Infinity. Yes, all good. So now we're ready to rumble. Web pages there, products are there. So let's get out there and make places genuinely brilliant to work. Right. So really up for it.
Good. What about you, Mr. Smith? What's your last couple of weeks been?
I feel like I need to draw on Chris's enthusiasm and vigour and everything there. It's like, yes, I'd love a summer holiday. I'm just envious when you talk about both the Euros and Mallorca, to be honest, Chris. But then the flip side of that is you throw the last 2 days in there, and Marie and I were sat outside, and we've got a lovely outlook at the back of the house. I think, God, if we've got days like this all the time, we don't actually need to go away sometimes. But what really rang true, and you mentioned it earlier, Chris, well, actually, when we talked this morning briefly, it was that piece of actually that downtime can be so powerful with regard to giving you that renewed vigour.
Yeah.
And actually what I'm guilty of a little bit at the moment, sharing on here is that bit of doing, actually, I'm getting a bit of downtime in between work. And so each day is a bit of up and down, as opposed to proper condensed work and then proper downtime. And I think sometimes it's a case of going, actually, it's good to say, I'm taking a week or two out and properly switching off to then re-hit it again with fresh eyes and fresh enthusiasm in a couple of weeks' time. So I think I'm sort of, like I say, things have quietened down somewhat on the coaching front as we start to get into summer. Things are starting to, I'm seeing where things will start to wind up again in August, September time. But it's thinking about those next few weeks. What do I do to make the most of those, both to get downtime and to then push on in the right way? So I think, we talked well this morning, Chris, and there were some great tips there on sort of blocking out time in the diary to go, right, this might be a day when I'm doing everything work-wise, and this is a day when it's downtime, and just starting to block things out. So, yeah, it's been a good couple of weeks, but a real mixture. What I've done, I don't know if anybody else has gone like this, I've done so much mowing, it's been ridiculous. It's like you finish mowing and you turn around and the bit you've just mowed is sprouting up behind you, like, shit.
You two farmers love it though. Get on
Exactly.
your happy days. That's downtime for you, Lee.
Yeah,
it is
Get back
actually.
out there.
It is. Just chugging along with a little mower.
I have to admit, I went out to cut the grass, and our grass cutting takes about 2 hours to do. And I went out to do it the other day. It must have been probably a week ago, with all good intentions to listen to the Just About Managing podcast, because I wasn't in it. And my bloody headphones were flat, weren't they? I was absolutely gutted. So I had to sit there for 2 hours just listening to the engine and my inner monologue. So
I love it. How have you been the last couple of weeks, John? What's been happening with you?
It's been a bit of a roller coaster of emotions and I guess busyness and family stuff. So 3 weeks ago, one of my main clients tragically passed away in an accident, and the family have asked me to step in as an interim MD for his group of businesses and investments. So, and I know the majority of his businesses fairly well through sort of mentoring, coaching, and being an advisor on several of his boards, but it's a completely different perspective when suddenly you're holding the I guess the keys to the business and making sure we maintain continuity and keep the business healthy on behalf of the family. So that's been challenging, tiring, but actually interesting and incredibly mentally taxing. I've like the you two as well. It's been it's been a while that I've worked a 5-day week because I think when you're doing the sort of the coaching and mentoring work, it's you do it in fits and starts, and you have those blocks of time off in between. So, but yes, it's incredibly sad, but it's I feel that it's important to me that I do the family and the business proud to keep things going and draw upon my kind of prior experience in order to keep things safe and stable, and but equally honouring his legacy as well. So I'm getting my arms around things now, and so lots of conversation, lots of reading, and but yeah, it's a good challenge to have for the next few months. But and then we've had our podcast producer, my oldest son Henry. It was his graduation this week, which is a massive highlight for us in the family, and incredibly proud of his success. So we were up. Well, I would call it north. Lee probably wouldn't, but we were up in Loughborough last week celebrating his graduation, which is incredibly proud and a great milestone. So yes, so it's all go. So it's good.
Well, congratulations, Henry. That's a fantastic achievement.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah, really
Congratulations.
good, really good news.
Yeah.
And in terms of the role, John, like best of luck.
Thank you.
And the family couldn't have someone who cares more about doing the right thing than you. So I'm sure you'll be absolutely the right person.
Thank you.
Make the right decisions. So
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, good luck.
Yeah,
completely.
So shall we roll into talking about last week's podcast? And obviously I wasn't there, unfortunately, but the reason was because I needed to be in a meeting with the family about the business. But but I have listened, as I said, twice, but it'd be great to kind of get your own individual reflections of consuming it at the time and thinking about it, latterly. Would be really interesting to get there. And as I said, Craig spoke so much, even Chris couldn't get a word in edgeways, which I find quite funny. It was
I had to wave my arms around and kind of like lean right in. So at certain times, you can tell when I want to speak. So I'm like this close to the camera. Come on, Craig, let me speak. Yeah.
So, it's brilliant to hear, though, isn't it?
You've known Craig for a while, Lee, right? So maybe you could give us all of us just a bit of colour around, your relationship with Craig, and then your thoughts on the podcast, because presumably you've heard some of this amazing feedback and direction before.
Yeah, he's like I say, he's just one of those guys that I can just sit and listen to. With regard to both his background, he talks about his story and his service, but also his experience in the corporate world and the leadership and coaching piece. And he's worked with a lot of people that we know at HSBC. So a lot of the hierarchy, some of them you'll know for good reasons, other ones you'll know for not such good reasons at HSBC. And I won't mention names there. But he is just one of those people where so the reason it came about, when I left HSBC, someone who used to work for me quite a few years ago in Hyderabad pinged me and said, as you're leaving, can you remember Craig Preston? And I said, well, I'd never dealt with him. I'd heard his name mentioned as he was coaching some of our seniors, but I'd never met him at all. And so Rishi, who put me in touch with him, said, well, he was one of our leaders on when we did Fusion, which was an HSBC leadership development program at Sandhurst. So it was based at Sandhurst Military Academy for the first and last sessions. It was brilliant. And I did it, but prior to Craig being there. And then I got Rishi on it a few years later when Craig was running it with IDG, which is one of the companies he mentioned. And so Rishi kindly introduced us when I left, or as I was leaving. And I said, I'll have a conversation with Craig and get some insight from him. And fast forward now nearly 18 months, and I've caught up with him, I think, at least every month. We've had an hour and a half on a video. And he's just given his time to me. And through that time, he's like I said on last week's podcast, he's mentored me, he's supported me, he's given me grounded advice, if you like, in a lot of that. He's coached me, but more than anything, he's just been a friend through it. It's similar to how we've been through that whole experience, the three of us. I think it's developed in a very similar way. And he's just been fantastic. And I always remember I say to other people, there was one bit of advice he gave me right at the start when he went into the coaching space. It was this is going to take time. So he was speaking experience. It takes time. Speak to everybody, build relationships, build rapport, and then you'll build a reputation. So it takes time, and be patient in it. In there, keep talking to lots of people, keep getting him out there. And then his third piece was said, have a plan B because it might not work. And it always rings true of going, actually, it gave me that positivity of, yes, there's ways to go out there. This is something to move into, but also that reality at the back of the mind of going, just bear in mind, you might need a plan B for this as well. And that's been really great advice as I've gone through this journey to keep the things ticking along in the background to go, actually, I might need to do something else. I might need to go back to contract and do something else as I start to push forward. But like I say, through that 18 months, I couldn't have asked for a better person from the industry, if you like, that we're all starting to move into, to give me that sort of independent support and advice and drive, and just to listen to a lot of the time as well. So there.
Yeah, it's amazing. That background, John, like, Army, Coca-Cola, consultancy, Aon, IDG, really, really broad. And what was interesting was how Craig was, able to draw a line through, and connect experiences and learnings through each one of those different kind of like areas, but to create simplicity out of all that kind of feedback and all those experiences. Yeah, so there were a few things that really resonated with me, of like sound bites from him, right? There was one around, corporates, kind of putting people into roles and then training them up. Or do you set someone up for success, which is definitely a Lloyd mantra, right? Do you train them before they get there so they're able to cope and that kind of stuff. So it was really, really interesting. So I thought that was just obvious, but just very succinctly put. I love the way that he also then, when we got into this big like leadership discussion, didn't we, Dave? Right, around Gareth Southgate and then Keir Starmer, and there was Rishi and Liz Truss and Boris Johnson and loads of different people.
Yeah.
But then he was able to distill all of that down into something that was quite simple, didn't he? It was just amazing. Yeah. He said, great leaders, culture, selection, mental management. They're the three areas. Right.
You're right.
It was just like, wow, that was like amazing. I mean, hopefully, like out of all of that stuff, John, when you were listening to it, at least some of that, like out of all the details, you've listened to it a couple of times, right? Did those three things kind of like pop out when you listened to it?
Absolutely. And listening to you talk now, I think what he was able to do is he brought simplicity to, so the examples he was talking about, well-read business or leadership authors, but he was kind of taking it to that next level of simplicity. I loved his story talking about the client who wanted to talk about going from good to great, and he said, no, okay, we just need to get from shit to just about working, or something like that. But it's that's kind of that simple pragmatism of, yes, you can do this, but let's be honest about where you're at and where you need to get to. It felt that it was that kind of directness that you need, but it was actually the examples he gave, I felt, were very consumable. So and relatable, from different walks of life. So
that's a great point. It's that relatability, isn't it? As well, like I say, it brings it. They're, as you guys are saying, they're really in-depth pieces of analysis, if you like, taken from these books. But it's the grounding of them all to make them consumable. To your point, I think that's so key. In there. That he said he's talked about that one a few times with me about the good to great versus shit to not bad.
Yeah.
And it's so true again. A lot of teams will talk about that good to great, and it's actually, you're not at that level yet. As he says in there, it was a great point in there about the good to great is that tiny percentile at the top.
Mm.
The hard work and the bulk of it, really, if you like, is getting to that point of the 80%, 90% of it in there. And I think there was, funny enough, since actually recording it, I've listened back to it twice myself. And each time picked up different bits. And I made notes in the end of going through it because there was some real sort of, there's nothing there that you go, God, that's magic, that changes everything.
Mm.
But there's so many snippets that just make sense.
Mm.
And I think, I was looking back at it, particularly, unfortunately, after England's exit or losing in the final, and then subsequently Gareth Southgate's resignation from there. And that sort of probably mixed feeling across the country of going, going back to the three pieces that you mentioned there, Chris, the culture, the selection, he probably had about nailed. There'll be arguments about selection, obviously, on the team side of things. But he made some difficult decisions both beforehand in not taking people and in the selection of teams. And then it was that battle management piece that you go, actually, was that the missing part of the jigsaw there that would have led things on? And then the other bit that really resonated from Craig's discussion as he left is he talked about that level 5 leadership, which is leaving the legacy behind.
Yes.
And how that lacks in a lot of leadership piece. And you hook back to the Southgate piece, you think, actually, it feels like Southgate's left a legacy. He's not leaving at the end of a journey and going, right, I'm done. All the team are aging. The culture's awful. It feels like he's leaving at a point when there's a real legacy for someone now to pick up and hopefully continue what he's done and build on it.
Yeah.
And leaving the jersey in a better place than he picked it up when he picked it up from the previous management and leadership there. So there were so many things that you could just pull out from that, I thought.
The piece that resonated with me the most was the running race example. And I think, this concept, and again, I'm sorry to the people on the podcast that we bore talking about HSBC, but I don't think it's unique to HSBC. I think generally in the banking industry, the concept of leadership is overly abused, and that differentiation between management and the role of management and the role of a leader is poorly understood. And again, I think the simplicity that Craig used in that example, the running race example, was absolutely perfect. And yeah, I think that, and I will most definitely use that in my conversations and in coaching and mentoring, because I think that getting people to understand what is their role, and a number of the people that I've sort of worked with probably over the last 2 years, they're at that pivot point between they've been managing for quite some time and they've kind of stepped up and now they're expected to lead. And there's that awareness of, okay, you never stop managing, but you've also now got to do this part of leadership in terms of actually encouraging that person to win the race and giving them that inspiration and structure around that, rather than it just being, well, you're not running fast enough, Chris.
It's interesting, all this stuff, right? Within that, the last bit that really resonated with me from Craig was around the importance of actually, in the common thing of like agile change and all this kind of stuff, but actually, in terms of to build trust, you need to invest in stability and support of the team, right? So not chipping and shopping and changing, and because then you're kind of like on like movable plates that people could fall off, right? So those relationships is not just between the leader and the manager; it's between the peers. Because actually, as we've spoken about before on here, to release the diverse skills, the skill stacking across a team, not just within individuals, that's then really powerful, and that takes time. So being brave enough to trust the team and for them to build the trust in you as the leader. Yeah, it's just really like, just again, just very lot of detailed content. Absolutely, John. Like as you've said, but that importance of breaking that down and say, if you want to build trust, you need to create stability, right? And then people will feel supported. They've got the room to live, to learn, to grow, right? Yeah, but brilliant. Really, really good. I mean, we'd love to hear, I'm sure, all three of us, what you guys out there listening to the podcast thought of like Craig, of what he said. Yeah, listen to it twice and then let us know.
At least twice, I think, Chris. At least, or maybe on half speed at times. The a couple of the pieces that I thought were really interesting, particularly from the large corporate world. I thought, and again, I don't know whether this resonates with yourselves on there, but there was two pieces he talked about where he said actually when he worked with Paul Ventusai, who I know from my days there, who was heading up sort of the market space, if you like, for a while, and then enterprise technology. Was that point, and the more I think about this, the more I sort of believe in it in a way of going, actually, he said, stop calling your leadership team an exco. It's not an executive committee. This shouldn't be a committee. This should be a team, a senior leadership team. And yeah, I think at some of those senior levels, they're not seen as teams still. It's seen as an exco.
Yeah.
And the other piece that rings back to then was one of the bits that Craig shared about his own experience of Coca-Cola, where he talked about who are the enemy or who are the opposition. And his were the own internal Coca-Cola team, not Pepsi out there or anything else at all. And therefore you're creating, which I suppose in some ways can be quite good, that internal competition. But it's only good if you've still got a view on who's the proper opposition.
Yeah.
Are we all aiming in the same direction? Because if you're internally competing against each other, particularly in the same senior leadership team as opposed to Exco, then are you really heading in the same direction together? Are you really on that strategic journey together? Or are you just trying to get the best for yourself and your function? And I thought that was, again, both those, I thought the Coca-Cola was a great example because that's quite an interesting one where first and second were Coca-Cola and Diet Coke. So what is the external competition? But it can be so easy to be drawn into that. The competition is Dave over here who's leading another technology team that faces off to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Wow. It's a lot there. And any last words of wisdom, Chris?
No, I'm still catching up from like being Craig, right? In a positive way. Yeah. I mean, there's no words of wisdom. Just obviously, just very grateful for him to spend the time with us and with this group. I'm sure, like you, like you can listen to him for like another like hour easily. So the reason, but like at the end of that time, we were like, we need to stop because I was in a rental house and we were getting kicked out there in 10 minutes. I was just like, you need to stop. I need to go. Well, the cleaners will literally be hoovering behind me. Yeah. So it was like, sorry, Dave,
going.
but that was brilliant. But we'll stop. It was just so good.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think the last reflection from me before we wrap up this first part of the podcast, which is relevant to the next part of the podcast, was what I thought worked really well was the relevance of the subject that we had literally just come fresh out of the UK election cycle, and to actually link not only the election but football into leadership and management, and those elements really brought it to life. And I think that was a good lesson for us on the podcast to think about in the future and with our guests and those kind of key pivotal moment themes. So yes.
Definitely. I wonder if Sir Keir Starmer listened actually, and whether he'll take that time to go to Chequers with his leadership team and build some stability. Well, I suppose time will tell. We'll ask him one day. One question I was going to ask actually, just in, I don't want to open a can of worms with this one, but you may be closer to this than me with sort of the history of the HSBC connection in there. But when you think about the legacy piece, that level 5 leadership, what's probably for yourself, John, more than anyone in a way, but what's that view of the Noel Quinn to George El Hedry transition and legacy aspect there? And did you have did from knowing George a little closer probably than we did from a business continuity perspective?
Don't want to implicate myself. I've still got shares, you know.
I could give a personal reflection myself, Lee,
Yeah, yeah,
because I know I worked directly with George in the time in the Middle East while
Yeah.
John thinks about what doesn't get himself into trouble. Okay. Right. So George was there. First time I met George, um, he was the head of markets, and there was a role to be the head of markets operations in the Middle East. And I met George, and it was directly to support his business. Okay. And he has gone on a stellar rise before and a stellar rise afterwards. Okay. Um, and I'll just give two simple examples of why I think George is such a strong leader. Okay. First one was related to when there was a big regulatory pressure inside the organization. And what George wanted to do was to make sure that the whole organisation was aware of what the challenges were and to make sure that everybody played their part and it wasn't just, like whitewashing of just
yeah.
like, we've got a review, let's make sure this is all clean. So he and his leadership team asked for people across the business from all levels to be able to create a booklet which explained what the challenges were and what our response was. And it was written from the bottom up
Brilliant.
rather than the top down.
So
And
that
then he
why
called a
piece
meeting
almost.
first thing in the morning for everybody who was a grade 3 and grade 4. We all came in first thing in the morning, and he personally taught us all that book. And at the end of that session, he said, guys, we're all in this together. I now need you to teach your teams. And we went out of that room and we all did it. Right. So his ability to connect and listen to and to appreciate the skills of everybody up and down the organization and then to do what's necessary and stand there himself and do it is remarkable. Yeah. So I think he'll do a phenomenal job at HSBC. He will connect the people to the strategy and the strategy to the people. And it won't just be based off of ratios. He will make them feel it. And that will be a significant difference. Right.
Brilliant.
And I think he's a perfect appointment at this point in time, right, for the organisation.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I love that personal connection.
I would echo that. I think he's Noel's Quinn has been a good leader for the period the bank has gone through. It's been a tough period, but he doesn't have the raw natural leadership ability that George does, and I think that George is able to more. He's more considered in terms of how he gets people to follow and believe him. And this again going back to one of the quotes that Craig said, which is it's by example. And I think that's a great example of Chris's. I think George, again, having worked with George, his biggest Achilles heel he's going to have to hold back on is he loves the detail, and it's being able to trust and empower people in the detail, because I think he's obviously already got an enormous role, but actually it's even bigger now. But I think I wish him the best of luck. I think he is exactly what the bank probably needs right now in terms of being able to drive relationships with regulators, but equally maintaining deep relationships with the client base of the bank. So good luck.
No, thank you for that, guys. Sorry for throwing that one at you randomly. It was just I was thinking about it. It seemed really relevant. And I didn't know you'd had so much contact with him, to be honest, Chris, in all honesty. And I thought you might have done, John, with the COO role. But it's great to get that insight. And it felt like that. But to know that, still close to our hearts, I'm sure HSBC is from the journey we've been on. But to know that it's being transitioned, somebody like that who walks the walk and again, going back to what Craig said and what Simon Sinek talks about a lot, that seems to want to say, this is the why, and get people on that journey of knowing what the why is and how everything they do relates to it. Hopefully that's a great next step for HSBC there.
Yeah, I agree. So that really does now wrap up the first part of the podcast. When we come back, we're gonna get into our reflection on the first series of Just About Managing, and some of our personal reflections of going through the last 12 episodes. Okay, welcome back. I can't believe we've done, well, actually 12 and a bit episodes, including this one now. I know for me personally, I've learned a lot along the way. And I think we are, I know I am as well, especially incredibly grateful for the feedback that we've received along the way in terms of how we communicate, the structure of the podcast, and it's really made us think about how we prepare, but also communicate with you as our listeners and audience. And I would probably say on the part of all of us, we're incredibly grateful for that. So but Chris, what's your reflection been of the path to episode 12?
Episode 12. Well, it's certainly better than Star Wars Episode 9, I would hope. Right? Anyone who knows me knows that really important thing for me in anything that I do is that things need to be fun. Right? So when you said just a minute ago, let's do some reflections on season 1, main thing I'd say is I'm just really grateful. I've had a fantastic time. It's been really good fun. I want to say thank you to you guys for that. Henry in the background, who doesn't want to be mentioned. Sorry, Henry, there you go again. And everybody who's listened or, contributed or it has been fun. Feel like I've learned a lot. And I think this just goes, marginal gain theory in like full effect, right? Try and be a bit better than episode 1 on episode 2, 3, next time you host, but like marginal gain theory, right? And being brave enough to kind of do stuff to really stretch yourself has been really important. I had different people tease me like nicely around, you're on a podcast and you used to take the mickey out of me for telling you to listen to one. Well, at least I'm open to like learning, right? So I think it's been really good. And I think we're getting better in terms of like structure and flow. I think the guest structure really helps us. And, we should use that to kind of grow the audience and to pull more people in and to bring more insights. Right. So I think the challenge is on us to think through the big topics that are out there that people will be interested in and to bring some real insights from our guests. Yeah. And I think maybe we should have more than 2 guests in season 2, right?
Yeah.
But they need to be awesome, right? Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah. And any suggestions on guests? Obviously, it could be quite difficult, probably, to get someone like Bill Gates, but
you never know.
Realistic guests that you feel will add value to the podcast. We'd love to engage with them and get them on board and to have a conversation and understand their opinions on life, leadership, and whatever else we may discover.
Yeah. Totally.
What do you think, Lee?
I think for me, I agree completely with what Chris said. Thanks to you two, as I say, and thanks to you, John, for suggesting it at the start. And when you sent that WhatsApp to, we going to give that context to people, we'd had a couple of conversations with the 3 of us, but we didn't catch up regularly as a 3. We were more all of us catching up with each other one-to-one on a regular basis over the last year or so. And then you set up that group and said, I've had a thought. I was thinking
at 6
about
o'clock in the morning. Yeah.
Let's do a podcast. And my immediate thought was, shit, no.
Now he tells us.
Definitely not. And it feels,
mine was just like,
I mean,
fuck it, yes.
but it goes again. You start talking then about, you go back to 18 months ago, say in February last year. Would we have ever, the three of us, gone, oh, come to July next year, we'll have done 12 episodes of a new podcast? You'd go, no, not a chance. I certainly would have done. In there. To your point, Chris, on marginal gains, and to quote Craig again, we've not gone from good to great, but hopefully we've gone from shit to not bad through the last 12 episodes.
Maybe we've got to shit.
Maybe we've just got to shit.
I don't know.
Got a long journey ahead of us. But I think again, you mentioned it again, John, that it is that marginal gains. The feedback's been fantastic. I think one piece, we've had loads of feedback coming in, but I think hopefully she won't mind us shouting out on here and naming her. But one piece that really resonated, really made a difference, I think, was Louise Rowan Holt coming back to us, both John in there, and going, I've listened to it and here's some thoughts on it from her experience of doing them internally.
While she was on a holiday as well.
Yeah, completely. And it was a proper, I was going to say dissection, that's the wrong word, 'cause it wasn't a dissection of us, but it was a proper sort of thought out analysis and suggestions in there that really did make a difference. So thanks to Louise, but as thanks to everyone else as well that sent in those thoughts.
Yeah.
And it feels, certainly for me, I felt a little less nervous going into them than I did at the start.
Yeah.
I always think back to when I used to do town halls at HSBC, one of my colleagues, who I won't name, she will get embarrassed, used to say to me, she'd ping me halfway through because I'd be talking and my arms would be like this. And she'd just ping and say, put down the windmill arms, just put them down. Because they'd be going like this as I'm talking. So unconsciously as I'm talking, I'm like trying to put my hands in my pockets and don't flail them around all over the place. But I've loved it. I've absolutely loved it. I really have enjoyed it, particularly after those first couple of episodes of getting the nerves and the structure and getting it a little more free flowing. And again, thanks to you guys for making it so enjoyable, and to Henry as well for telling us where we're going wrong and for bringing it all together for us. You
do realise you've made the fundamental mistake now, because the title of this episode is going to be From Shit to Not Half Bad. But that's what's going to appear on Spotify.
I'll take that right now.
Oh dear. So, right. Well, on that note, or in the words of Top Gear, on that bombshell, we hope you've enjoyed this season of Just About Managing. And remember to follow the podcast wherever you listen, and to stay tuned for Series 2 coming very soon. He's been Chris Dingle, he's been Lee Smith, and I'm John Lloyd, and you've been listening to Just About Managing. Goodbye.